Hungarian Folk Tales. The Dyer's Apprentice. Once upon a time, there lived a woodcutter with his wife. On a fine spring morning, the woman gave birth to a baby boy. By the time the lad turned 13 years of age, the woodcutter died. The boy and his mother were very poor. Finally, the young boy walked into the village looking for a job. There he came upon a dyer who hired him as an apprentice. He earned only very little as an apprentice, but he always gave every penny to his mother. Suddenly one morning he turned to his mother. "Mother, I had a dream last night." "Tell me all about it, my son." "I cannot talk about my dream before it is time, even if my life depends on it," he said. "Well, all right." In the morning the boy went to see his master, told him that he had had a dream, but he never revealed what his dream was about. The master got angry and started beating his apprentice. The boy ran out to the street, but the master rushed after him with a whip in his hand. At that very moment in time, the king was passing by in his gilded carriage, and he called to the master, "Hey you, why are you beating that young man?" The master told the king everything one by one. Finally, the king ordered him to hand over the boy to him, and he would find out what the dream was all about. Once they got to the king's court, the young lad was literally bathed in milk and honey. 3 weeks later, the king summoned the boy and asked him how he liked being in the palace. "I quite like it here," replied the boy. "Well, you see, son, I am trying my best to please you," said the king. "What about pleasing me a little?" "Oh, your majesty, I will do whatever I can to please you, but what can I do if it isn't possible?" "All right then, all you should do is tell me what you dreamt the other night." "Oh, your majesty, that is an impossible task, because even if you take my life, I cannot reveal my dream to you before it comes true." And so it went on and on for 7 years, but all was in vain. Finally, the king lost all hope and patience and had the boy walled in. In the meantime, the king's daughter also grew up to be a beautiful girl, and she fell in love with the boy. She stole a purse filled with gold coins from her father and gave it to the bricklayer. She instructed the man to leave a small opening in the wall. Through that small opening, she gave food to the young boy 3 times a day. She kept feeding him every day for another 7 years. In the meantime, the Turkish Sultan announced he wished to marry the princess, but the old king did not want to hear about it. The Sultan sent 3 identical donkeys to the king, asking him to identify the exact age of each animal. Otherwise, he would attack and destroy the king's country. The king was frightened and he ran around asking everybody for a solution, but nobody was able to tell the exact age of the donkeys. As the daughter was carrying lunch to the boy behind the wall one day, she told him what had happened. In the end, the boy told her not to worry. He told her to go home and sleep through the night. And when she awoke the next morning, she should tell her father the following: "Give the donkeys oats that are 1, 2, and 3 years old. The animals will eat the oats that correspond with their own age." And so it happened. The king was happy that he finally managed to save his country. But the Turk just couldn't rest. He wrote another letter to the king with the following message: "This time I am sending you a stick with bludgeons on both ends." He wrote, "If you cannot tell which is the upper and which is the lower end of the stick, I am going to have you decapitated." The king's joy suddenly turned to sorrow. In the meantime, the princess dreamt that if they tied a single hair around the middle of the stick and lifted it, the lower end, which was thicker, would bend towards the ground. They immediately sent a letter with the answer to the Sultan. The Sultan was so angry he nearly had a fit, but he could still not rest. He sent another letter plus 3 penknives asking the king to identify which of the knives belonged to a gentleman, a soldier, and to a peasant. Once again, the princess dreamed up the solution. She said that the knives should be stuck into the ground next to a burning fire. The one that smells like garlic belongs to a peasant. The one that smells of scent belongs to a gentleman. And finally, the one that oozes blood must belong to the soldier. The king was overjoyed and sent a letter to the Turkish Sultan. The Sultan never sent another letter. The king was curious to find out how his daughter always knew the right answers. Finally, his daughter confessed everything, and the king ordered his men to tear down the wall. Everyone was happy, and they held a magnificent wedding in the palace. As they were eating, the king once again asked the apprentice to tell him what his dream was all about. "This was my dream, Your Majesty," he said, pointing to his bride and the wedding ring. And they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. Angel Lambs. Once there lived a very poor man on the edge of the forest in his little hut with his wife and 3 sons. He earned his bread by cutting wood. Poor they were, and their life was hard. One day the man was working in the forest and had become very tired. He took out his satchel to eat the scone his wife had baked him in the ashes of the fire. While he was chewing away on his food, there came an old man. "What are you doing here, poor man?" "Just cutting some wood." "What's that you're eating?" "Nothing special, just a scone baked in the ashes. Won't you have a little for yourself?" "Listen, my man, have you a family?" "3 sons, but they're still small. I need someone to serve me. I have a flock of sheep and it needs to be watched over. Give me your eldest son into service. 3 days he will work and 100 florins he will earn." Now the poor man went home very pleased and said to his son, "Listen, my boy, tomorrow you'll come with me to the forest and there you'll meet an old man who will take you into service." In the morning, his mother packed his satchel and off he went with his father to the forest. Hardly had they arrived when the old man came. He took the boy by the hand and led him away with him. Now they went deep into the forest until night fell. Then they came to a hut. "Now, son, here we are." Daylight came, the boy went out, and there he saw the fine flock of sheep. "This is the flock you are to watch over. Here's a staff for you to follow my lambkins. Here's a satchel for you so that you can bring back in it to me some of what they eat, and in it there's a flask for you to fill with whatever they drink from." So the lambs set off and made their way into the forest. The further they went in, the darker it became. Then they found a wide river before them, and there was only a narrow plank to cross the river. The sheep set off, but their weight was such as to bend the plank until their bellies were in the water itself. Now this worried the lad. "I'll never be able to cross on that plank, it'll collapse under me." The last of the lambs came to rub against his leg. "Just climb onto my back, and I'll take you across." But the boy struck its back roughly with the staff, lay on his stomach, in the grass and waited. Some time later he heard the sound of their bells as they came back. The last of them came to him and rubbed against his leg. "Follow us." Then his master's request came to his mind. He gathered together a handful of grass for the satchel, put some water into the flask, and followed the flock home. When they arrived, the old man was waiting for them in his yard. "So, my boy, I see you've brought my lambkins home. Are they still all here?" "Yes, master." "Did you bring what they ate?" "Yes, master." "Did you bring what they drank?" "That too, master." "Let me have a look." "No, my boy, that's not what they ate, that's not what they drank, for these lambs of mine cannot live on this. You didn't do your proper service. Tomorrow I'll take your next brother." But his younger brother didn't fare any better, for he did exactly the same with the old man's flock. At home, the poor man spoke to the youngest of his sons. "Son, it's your turn. Tomorrow you'll come with me to the forest." The next day the old man was waiting for them. He took the boy by the hand and led him into the forest until it got dark. "Here, my boy, is where you will sleep." In the morning, the old man came to knock on the door. The boy hung the satchel around his neck and sat off after the sheep. The sheep walked and walked along the edge of the forest. Once they went into the forest, everything got dark. In the middle of the forest, it was so dark that the youngest boy was gripped by fear, all the more when they came to the river. "Oh, what will become of me if I cross the river as well?" One of the lambs came to rub against the boy's leg. "Child, sit on my back." So the boy sat on its back, and that's how they crossed the river. Once they were across, they went further and further into the dark until suddenly there was a great brightness in front of them. The boy had to rub his eyes, for there in the middle of the brightness was a chapel. The sheep quickly filed in. Once he was in, he saw the sheep shake themselves twice in front of the altar and change into angels. From a beautiful chalice they served themselves each bread and a little wine. Then they shook themselves once again and turned back into sheep. The last of them to turn into an angel had taken the boy's satchel, then took bread, poured some wine into his flask, and put both into his satchel before setting off with the others towards home. When they reached the river, the boy got onto the sheep's back again, crossed over the plank, and set off home tranquilly. The old man was waiting for them in the yard. "Now, child, are all the sheep here?" "All here, master." "Have they eaten?" "They have, master." "Have they drunk?" "They have, master." "Well then, show me your satchel and your flask. My child, I can see that you have served me faithfully, and so I grant you a wish as well as the 100 florins you have earned." And that was when the boy knew that the old man was the Lord himself, and the lambs his angels. So what he said was this: "Master, I would like to serve you always. My only wish is to be allowed to go home once to my parents to bid them farewell." And that is what happened. Home he went, bade goodbye to his father, his mother, and his 2 brothers, handed over to them his wages, and returned to the old man, whom he still serves to this very day. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Prince Who Turned into Stone. Once upon a time, there lived an old king who had 2 fine sons. One day they stood before their father, and they said it was time for them to go and see the world and the 7 seas. The old king was sad, but as there was nothing he could do, He filled their pockets with gold and bade them farewell. The boys said goodbye and off they went. They kept walking for a long time until they finally reached a strange new town. When they arrived, the people of the town were having a fair. They were selling beautiful bouquets of flowers, and each prince bought one for himself. They tied a red ribbon around one and a green around the other, and they went on their way. Suddenly they came upon a man with a huge beard. "Which way are you going, old man?" "I would like to sell these animals here," he said, "if only there was someone to buy them." The two princes felt very sorry for the old man, and since they liked the animals anyway, they finally bought them. And so they kept marching forward until they came to a fork in the road. Finally the younger one said, "It's your turn to choose, brother. I will take the black road." "All right, but let me tell you what. See this walnut tree by the roadside? Let's both tie our bouquets on a branch. When one of us gets back here and sees that the flowers of the other one have wilted and withered, he should know that his brother is dead." They did so and went their separate ways. The older brother kept going until he arrived in a town. The place was all covered in black drapes. The prince went into an inn and asked the innkeeper why they were in mourning. The innkeeper explained that there was a foreign knight who said that the king should give him the country and his daughter unless he was defeated by one of the king's men. Many young warriors responded to the challenge, but they were all slain, including the two sons of the king. Our prince challenged the foreign knight the next morning, and he was so quick and clever with a sword that the foreign knight was killed in an instant. There was celebration and joy in the town. The king took the prince to his palace and promised him the hand of his daughter, plus the country, once he died. And they lived happily without a care in the world. One day the king said, "I would love to eat some wild boar." "I'll be happy to get you some if that's what you want." The prince mounted his horse and rode out to the forest, taking the animals with him. He was busy trying to find a wild boar, but finally night fell. He settled down and made a fire to keep himself warm. Suddenly he heard a voice calling from the tree above. "I'm cold. I'm freezing." "If you're so cold, why don't you come down? I have a fire burning down here. This should warm you up." As he looked up, he spotted an incredibly old woman among the branches. "I would never dare to descend. I'm frightened of the beasts," she croaked. "I will throw down a twig, hit all of them with it, then I know they won't hurt me anymore." The prince did as he was told, and all of a sudden, all three animals turned into stone. The old hag jumped down from the tree, seized the twig from the young man, and hit him too. The prince immediately turned to stone himself. They were all waiting for the prince to return home, but it was in vain. 1 month went by, and during that time the younger prince visited the town of Joy and returned to the large walnut tree. He saw that his brother's bouquet was wilted and dry. He walked down the road until he got to the town. He found the same inn that his brother visited before him. The innkeeper was very happy to see him. "Thank heavens, the prince is back." "Hey, good man, I'm not the one I seem to be," said the younger prince. "The man before me was probably my brother. I am trying to find him myself." When he spoke to the old king, he told him that his beloved son-in-law went to the forest and no one had seen him since. "I shall not rest until I find him," said the younger prince. Finally, he himself was lost just like his brother. When darkness fell, he lit a fire to keep himself warm, and his animals also stretched out for a rest. Suddenly, he heard a wailing from above his head. "I am cold. I am freezing." "If you're so cold, why don't you come down?" he said. "I have a fire burning down here. This should warm you up." "But I'm afraid of the beasts. I will throw down a twig, hit all three of them with it, and then I'll know they won't hurt me anymore." Maybe this old witch killed his brother. Instead of touching the animals, he only stroked the dirt with a twig. And when the old hag jumped down from the tree, she was attacked by the wild beasts. "What have you done with my brother? Where is he? The large stone behind you is your brother, and the 3 flat ones are the animals. Swish them with the twig, your touch will revive them." The prince did as he was told. His brother told him everything. Finally, he returned to the witch. "Good deeds are rewarded by good in return, but evil deeds shall be punished. Now it is your turn to turn to stone, lest you should harm another soul." The old witch turned into stone and never left the forest again. She is still there to this very day. Where? Somewhere on this side of here and the far side of there, where a little pig snorts the air.